Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. I'm Courtney Chapin. I'm the White House Liaison and Director of Congressional Affairs at the National Endowment for the Humanities. Welcome and thank you all for coming. Before we begin, I'd like to thank two veterans who work in the White House, neither of which is here today, but Matt Flavin and Darianne Page made it possible for us to invite all of you, so I want to thank them. I'd also like to thank Kyle Learman from the White House Office of Public Engagement and my two wonderful assistants, Claire Noble and Caitlin Green, who did pretty much everything to make today possible for all of us. Could the veterans in the room please stand or raise your hands, please? Okay, well, let's give them all a round of applause. We're all here today to honor you. And we believe the road to truly honoring you is paved with understanding. The two great programs we're about to showcase offer us a chance to look through the lens of the humanities, through, in this case, literature and drama, and see the experience of veterans and those who care for them with greater clarity and greater understanding. Our hope is that after today, those of you working to improve the lives of veterans will consider hosting these programs and think of the humanities and the NEH as a source for support and inspiration as you expand and improve on the fine work that you're already doing. So now I'm proud to introduce to you the chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities, Jim Leach.
Well, thank you, Courtney, for that kind introduction, and thank you also for organizing this event. I believe several former colleagues of mine from the House of Representatives will be with us today. One I know is here, Mike Michaud from Maine, who is the ranking member on the Subcommittee on Health for Veterans Affairs Committee. And I think Bob Filner from California will be with us shortly. When thinking about ways to support our veterans using the humanities, isn't the first idea that occurs to most Americans, but it is time proven. The prospect of the humanities helping those who've undergone the gravest of human traumas, what the ancient Greeks called pathos, is as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. Understanding the experience of war and its after effects is a complex challenge for combat veterans, for their families and caregivers, and not incidentally for society itself, where war is always controversial, but in the United States today, I don't think there's ever been a time period where there's been more unanimity of support for those who have served. And this is a very important aspect of our society that has to be understood by veterans, and because coming home can be so difficult. The humanities provide common ground. They make it possible for all Americans to unite behind the men and women who serve in our armed forces, their families, and the people who work most closely with them. The National Endowment for the Humanities offers dozens of veterans programs across the country, many of them initiatives of our state councils. And in this regard, I'm delighted the representatives of 5 councils, those of Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, New York, and Maine, are with us today. NEH programs range from art and museum exhibits to oral history, writing, and acting projects. All are done at minimal cost to the taxpayer for maximum benefits to the veterans. One such initiative that isn't represented here today because it's just been initiated is a writing program of the Missouri Humanities Council. And I'd like to give 2 very brief incidents from the first holding of a session of that program. One incident involved a veteran who wrote a composition, and a psychologist working in the program read it and turned to the veteran and said, "How long have you been contemplating suicide?" At which point the veteran was taken aback, and the psychologist then went over the words that he jotted down, perhaps subconsciously. And the veteran suddenly came to grips with the issue, and at the end of the session reported that he thought the program had saved his life. Another veteran in the program who had been badly wounded and had lost a great deal of capacity to express himself verbally. Sat down with a piece of paper and started jotting words down, and to his surprise, they came out in a kind of a poetic way. And at the end of the session, it dawned on him and the people at the session that he had created a great deal of poetry, that poetry had tapped his soul, or vice versa. And so it ended up by the end of the session that perhaps one veteran's life had been saved and one soul had been regenerated. Those are extraordinary things that can happen to people in very different kinds of circumstances. In any regard, the two programs that you hear from today involve a theater program featuring vets that is engaged all across the country, and a literature and medicine program that is now in 20 veterans' hospitals. The Aquila Theater of New York has been using classic Greek plays to bring perspective about the effects of war on combatants through history. Their format has been described as drama for combat veterans, by combat veterans, performed by combat veterans. One former Army Ranger who participated in a program more than a year ago at the Virginia Military Institute said that the play exactly described his feelings as he came out of Afghanistan. Another said, "I never knew a play was written about me." The literature and medicine program is a different kind of endeavor. It is a hospital-based, scholar-led reading and discussion program for those who care for veterans. One might ask, why give such a programmatic attention to the caregiver? But participating a year ago at Maine's Veteran Hospital, the oldest, I understand, of all veterans hospitals in the country, I was struck by the comments of the head nurse who told me that she would have quit long ago if it had not been for the program. It brought perspective to her work and unity, she said, to the staff. It uplifted spirits so that the all-consuming daily effort to make sure that veterans are professionally cared for in the most caring way possible could go on. Now I'd like to introduce Victoria Bonbacher, who will be retiring this year, having worked 20 years for the Maine Humanities Council. Victoria is a pioneer policy maker. She conceived and initiated the first literature and medicine program in the country, and she will now lead a discussion of this groundbreaking initiative. Victoria, come on up.
Thank you, Jim. And I want to reiterate the chairman's welcome to all of you, and to thank the NEH and Courtney and Caitlin and her staff for organizing this event to highlight the ways that the humanities programs can and do benefit veterans. I also want to recognize the congressman from Maine, Mike Michaud, who has been recognized earlier. We're thrilled to have you here. As you heard, my name is Victoria Bonbacher, and I am the Director of Literature and Medicine, Humanities at the Heart of Healthcare. This is a program of the Maine Humanities Council. Literature and Medicine is a 14-year-old reading and discussion program for hospital staff that started in Maine, has been in 26 states and 180 hospitals, and actually 21 now VA healthcare facilities. None of this would have been possible without long-term support from NEH. In fact, it is our most recent grant from NEH that has allowed us to focus on VA facilities over the past 3 years, working with staff in those facilities. The chairman described a little bit about our approach, but we do feel this does serve veterans. But what do we mean by this? Literature and medicine takes care of the people who take care of veterans, the health professionals in VA facilities. Good care for veterans depends on a high level of performance and commitment by their health care givers. What we have found is that health professionals who participate in this facilitated reading and discussion program serve their patients better. They gather monthly to think about their work through the lens of literature. And the readings provide a jumping-off point for them to reflect on their patients, their colleagues, and even themselves. And the collegial and confidential discussions help deepen their understanding and broaden their perspectives. Through this sustained engagement, they show a significant increase in empathy, cultural awareness, communication and interpersonal skills, and job satisfaction. This all results in better patient care for veterans. Let me give you two examples. The chief medical officer at one participating VA said that he had a better understanding of PTSD and other effects of combat trauma after the readings and discussions of literature and medicine. Imagine what it means to an entire institution to have its CMO more sensitive and aware of the effects of combat trauma. In another example, a VA receptionist said she now understands that if veterans are angry when they approach her desk, they are not necessarily angry at her. Maybe it's a result of past experiences or their frustration with the system. But this understanding allows her to be more patient and more compassionate and to serve them better. We believe that if a veteran has faced physically or mentally damaging situations, the health professional who is caring for that veteran needs to understand something about the wounds. At the same time, healthcare professionals themselves who serve veterans day after day, they need to be cared for. Thus, literature and medicine aims at the intersection of healthcare professionals and their patients, and it seeks to encourage and support the kinds of interaction that benefit all of them. Why literature? Literature is really the best means we have of standing in the shoes of others, of seeing the world through another's eyes. I'm sure many of you have experienced what ways in which you change if you have read a good piece of writing. Maybe you see or understand a situation differently, or a person's reaction. Add to that the format of the program, an informal, first-name basis and confidential discussion that invites participants to step out of their professional roles and share reflections with colleagues on what they have read, what it has meant to them, and thinking all the time about the human dimensions of their work and the impact that these discussions will have on that. We know that literature and medicine has significantly changed and improved the way health professionals understand their patients' past experiences and their current problems. It has improved the way they interact with their patients, and in some cases has even encouraged them to continue working at the VA, and the chairman gave us an example of that. We hope that some of you will want to have literature and medicine at your VA facility. Unfortunately, we no longer have funding from NEH or any other source at the moment to underwrite programs outside of the state of Maine. But we would be delighted to work with you nonetheless if you would like to explore starting a program at your facility. Now I would like to invite you to have a taste of literature and medicine, a discussion of literature. Usually, it's 20 to 25 people sitting around a table. So today will obviously be different. In fact, it will be a first. But I think it's worth a try. In your programs on page 3, I believe, you will find a copy of a poem, AB Negative, the Surgeon's Poem. I will read it out loud, and then for the next few minutes, we'll talk about it. I have asked our panelists, who come from the Baltimore VA hospital and who are experienced literature and medicine participants, to help get us started. But I hope all of you will feel free to participate as well. And just please raise your hand and wait for the microphone to get to you so that we all can hear. The acoustics seem to be very good in here. Maybe we'll find we don't need a microphone, but I suggest we start with one. This is a poem by Brian Turner, who is a veteran and a prize-winning poet. AB negative, the surgeon's poem. Thalia Fields lies under a gray ceiling of clouds, just under the turbulence, with anesthetics dripping from an IV into her arm. And the flight surgeon says, the shrapnel cauterized as it traveled through her here, breaking this rib as it entered, burning a hole through the left lung to finish in her back. And all of this she doesn't hear, except perhaps as music, that far-away music of people's voices when they speak gently and with care. A comfort to her on a stretcher in a flying hospital en route to Landstuhl, just under the rain at midnight. And Thalia drifts in and out of consciousness as a nurse dabs her lips with a moist towel, her palm on Thalia's forehead, her vitals slipping some as burned flesh gives way to the heat of blood, the tunnels within opening to fill her, just enough blood to cough up and drown in. Thalia sees shadows of people working to save her, but cannot feel their hands, cannot hear them any longer. And when she closes her eyes, the most beautiful colors rise in darkness, tangerine washing into Russian blue, with the droning engine humming on in a dragonfly's wings, island palms painting the sky an impossible hue with their thick brushes dripping green. A way of dealing with the fact that Thalia feels is gone, long gone, about as far from Mississippi as she can get, 10,000 feet above Iraq with a blanket draped over her body, and an exhausted surgeon in tears, his bloodied hands on her chest, his head sunk down, the nurse guiding him to a nearby seat and holding him as he cries. Though no one hears it, because nothing can be heard where pilots fly in blackness. The plane like a shadow guiding the rain here in the droning engines of midnight. So, as I said, I've asked our experienced literature and medicine participants to help us get started, and I'm just going to throw out a general question, and feel free, also hands in the audience. It seems to me that lots happens in this poem, and I wonder what stands out for any one of you.
Excuse me.
And
well,
I should introduce.
For me personally, the last part, as far as the doctor is concerned, with the surgeon, his bloody hands on her chest, his head sunk down, and the nurse guiding to a nearby seat and holding him as he cries. There's a sense of helplessness, that there's nothing he can do anymore, that maybe that she has slipped into death. And given the title of AB negative, which is the rarest of blood types, that there's something that, since it is so rare, that there's nothing that can be done. And I feel, as a father of four, as I feel something that, should something ever befall in my children, and something I can't do, I can sympathize with something like that.
I think that that the poem shows the real stand of the physician. You know, the beginning of the poem, I think, illustrates so much of what we think of as the detachment of the medical person. He's talking in those terms of, you know, the shrapnel cauterized. You know, it traveled through or here, breaking this rib as a dent or burning a hole through the lung. That sounds so functional, so clipped and so, you know, clinical and detached, and what we expect of the surgeon. And yet, by the end of the poem, what we see is the utter vulnerability of the surgeon, and something that I think that we don't think about, or at least those who aren't in healthcare don't think about, is that for those of us who do care, who do give, you know, of ourselves when we take care of patients, that what we learn in nursing school, or at least what I learned in nursing school, was about being personally impersonal. That I needed to always keep a piece of myself back, because if I gave too much, that I might no longer be able to function. And this is what this poem says a bit of. It says, I have to hold myself, I have to talk clinically, but at the end, he still can't. He has to let go because there is so much pain. And, you know, if any of you saw that Washington Post story last year about what these surgeons go through, this poem so clearly illustrates what those longitudinal flights are about, that real element of the work that they do to save our men and women, and then the loss that we must feel when they're not able to do that. And that's the brilliance of this, the absolute brilliance.
Is there anything you want to add, Marianne?
I did. If you'll notice at the beginning of the poem, they're looking through the... If you'll notice at the beginning of the poem, they're looking through the eyes of the patient. And who's there comforting but the nurse, wetting her lips? And it makes a comfortable environment for a very desperate situation. And those little points, I think the poem really brings out, that patients are treated with dignity, and that everyone is really working very hard to have a successful outcome, even if it doesn't happen. And yet it's support from colleagues, the nurse at the end helping to move the surgeon away from the body. And having been on some of those flights, the medevac, it's an amazing process. And to see military medicine in action, this poem really does a very, very nice job.
Do I see any hands out in the audience? Comments? Reactions? Thoughts?
Well, I thought that it also said, pointed out the importance of the role of the nurse, because she was a nurse to the patient as well as being a nurse to the doctor. And so in talking particularly about the impact of this on teamwork, that she took a great deal of the nurturing role on her responsibility, whereas the doctor was initially, anyway, taking the technical role of, of doing the mechanical work, if you will. And of course, he later empathizes too, but she's empathizing all along.
Great, thanks. There's a hand there on the aisle.
Part of the beauty of this poem is at the beginning you mentioned that it was pretty clinical in terms of the description of the injuries, but and then later it ends with the reaction of the medical staff. But there is a portion of this poem that's so exquisitely beautiful as seen through her eyes. And a lot of times we take care of the body, but there's the victim, and so that I found was exquisite in terms of the poem.
Thank you. Someone here?
Yeah, I was struck by how much is told about the patient, first of all, a woman who has been fighting. We know she comes from Mississippi. She is presented as not just a patient, but in very human terms. And I think if you've ever suffered a severe illness or injury of any kind, that sort of twilight zone where you hear all the voices around you as kind of a chorus in the background is beautifully portrayed.
What do any of you make of the fact that the patient here has a name, but the nurse and the surgeon do not have names? Is that significant? Does that have any weight?
I didn't go to zero in on the name, but I had been a nurse with the Veterans Administration working in surgery before many years, and I left it after the second AIDS patient passed away. But I have been there when these patients have come in. And what I felt through this whole pain, the whole thing, was the patient and the nurse and how she was compassionate. I've been there when they've grabbed your hand, the patient has grabbed your hand, and you have grabbed their hand. And I felt this through this whole thing because I've been there and done that. And it was touching to me when she wrote this. And then the ending of how she just closed her eyes. And I felt how she took the doctor, took him and set him down because he was crying. And she understood exactly. And I'm quite sure she gave him a hug.
Thank you. And who's taking care of the nurse? Just a thought, a question. Any other comments?
Well, I suppose it has to be hard for medical staff to be that invisible when soldiers are injured, they're cared for. Their names, like in this poem, are remembered, but the people that care for them are virtually invisible. So that's got to be hard to deal with.
That's a very interesting thought.
Hi, I wanted to acknowledge the reality that although I'm neither a veteran or a person in the medical field, as a poet, the message is so significant for society to receive. This brings any person immediately front and center, and we get it. It's necessary for our civilization, whether you want to talk about America or this world. We have a need to understand the experiences of one another, and certainly on the front that veterans are bringing back from their encounters of wherever they are. This type of situation has to be acknowledged, and where better than through the arts, where better than through poetry. I think this is so powerful, and yet it doesn't bring us to tears. It brings us to understanding, and that's the power of the poem.
Thank you.
After I read it, I feel the feeling, of Celia is the main theme. If you forget their words, if you try to feel the poem as colors, like Celia, the patient's feeling is the main thing, and the little bit nurse in the front and the doctor in the back. It seems at that point, to the patient, nothing is so clear anymore. It's this kind of abstract feeling you had. But I feel that feeling connected with the doctors and the nurses.
Thank you. There was another hand in here, closer to the front.
As some of the ladies have kind of stated, to me it was in my way of my expressing my feelings for it was terribly beautiful, and I mean as a whole. If you put all of these words on a canvas, you would have something between Salvador Dali, Monet, and Michelangelo. But what I see in this is something therapeutic, not just in the execution of what's going on, but this is therapy for these surgeons themselves. I mean, think about what this person will be like if they didn't put this on paper. So there's more than one way to look at this. Look at this as therapy for the people who are helping as well.
Thank you.
One of the things that struck me in the poem is the real peacefulness that comes with her death. And I think those of us who have worked with dying patients really have recognized that. And it does provide, in a sense, a certain comfort that release when somebody does die who clearly has been suffering, that there is a peacefulness in that. And it's very present in the poem, I think.
Thank you. Is there a new hand there somewhere? Thank you.
I'd like to be the devil's advocate. I do think that they were all trying to be careful. They were trying to put their own feelings in there, but I felt if I was Thalia, there wasn't enough done for me. I was still an object there, slowly dying. They put, moist towels on her lips, and they had an IV going for fluids. And supposedly by the poem, she's seeing colors and voices, but no one's really holding her hand, or I didn't get that out of the poem, where they were doing more other than this object sitting there, and they're trying to work out their own feelings. So I'm kind of looking at it from a little different perspective.
Thank you. Could you hand the microphone back of you? There's a hand in back.
Hi. I actually had a little different feeling. You asked if there was some significance that she had a name. And I think there was great significance there because for the surgeon, it isn't just a patient, it's a person with a name. And that's what I thought the significance was, that the Thalia had a name and the surgeon and the nurse did not.
Great. And does anyone else want to respond to our earlier commenter who felt that the patient was invisible?
Well, that is kind of part of the comment that I wanted to make, not directly to respond to that, but these are also military doctors and nurses. So they're losing one of their own. So that's also a part of the pain that they're feeling, that they're part of combat as well.
I find these, as a person who is not in either the medical field or in the VA or a veteran, I just find these comments so helpful. So thank you. I hope everyone else who sits in my chair feels the same way. Yes.
I just wanted to add, in response to that comment, that the line that struck out to me the most was after the ellipses, after the beautiful colors of her slipping away, a way of dealing with the fact. The poem, the feeling in it is one way of dealing with it. And it is a way that sometimes doctors and nurses have to take. And I think that kind of excuses the poem from its very careful beauty for me.
And maybe it's the way the poet had to deal with it. Here.
Hi, as a female, excuse me, as a female soldier, what speaks to me the most is a description that there are no more front lines or gender lines in war and in these times. And I realized more that the way that she died, it was obviously violent, and it just lets you know that the sacrifices that we as women are making as well. And I also wonder if she was married. I wonder if she has children, if she was a single mother. So it just begs the question that I wanted to learn more about her. But as a soldier, again, it just lets me know that we're making just as much as a sacrifice. And maybe because she was a woman, maybe the surgeon and the nurse did take it a little bit harder.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we have time for one more comment. We could go on, as you can see, but, sir? Oh, I'm sorry, there's somebody who has the microphone already.
I see this as a witness's account, because none of these things are done in a vacuum. On a medevac flight, there's people sitting up and down the walls watching this go on in front of them. So it's a more of a microcosm, but it's a witness's account.
And maybe this poet was one of those witnesses. So thank you, panelists, and thank you all for rising to this occasion. As I hope you realize, we could have gone on for a long time. This is just a tiny, tiny taste of a literature and medicine experience, which typically would be 1.5 to 2 hours, often poems paired with short stories or longer readings. So now we're going to show you a short, I promise, PowerPoint about the program.
Literature and Medicine is a humanities reading and discussion program. It brings together mixed groups of health professionals in healthcare facilities to reflect on their work by talking about what they have read. The groups are guided by an outside facilitator, typically a literature professor. Why this focus on literature? Because literature, especially fiction, offers the best way for any of us to stand in the shoes of others, to see the world through another's eyes. Literature and Medicine began in Maine in 1997 and since then has been in 26 states. On this map, literature and medicine states are shown in orange. VA hospitals involved in literature and medicine are marked with stars, and Maine, as the state where the program began, is in red. The first program in a VA hospital was in Togus, Maine in 2002. Thanks to a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, a major supporter of the program, as of 2011, literature and medicine is now in 21 VA hospitals from California to New England, South Carolina to South Dakota. The books selected for a group to read are chosen because of the insights and new perspectives they can offer on issues that confront healthcare professionals daily. A reading list is developed for each hospital individually, so the readings focus on the issues of greatest importance to that hospital. Issues that the readings might address include those of end of life, Alzheimer's, PTSD, chronic illness, communication, medical errors, and many others. This is a sampling of the kinds of books that are read and discussed by literature and medicine groups. As you can see, the readings represent a variety of genre: fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and plays. Some readings are about illness or death from the patient's perspective, while others are from the perspectives of a variety of kinds of healthcare professionals. For example, over several months, a group might read poems by Donald Hall chronicling his grief at the death of his wife, along with a Pulitzer Prize-winning play about a mortally ill cancer patient struggling to maintain control. They could also read a short story about the experience of aging, poems written by an inner-city nurse, a novel about the dilemma of a psychiatrist during World War I charged with rehabilitating his shell-shocked soldiers to return to the trenches, and finally, a study of the parallels between the experience of warriors in the Trojan War and that of American soldiers in Vietnam. Literature and medicine groups consist of between 15 to 25 people, plus the outside facilitator. The groups typically meet once a month for 5 to 6 sessions in the early evening. It is totally voluntary. What are the characteristics of a literature and medicine group? It is heterogeneous. Members are drawn from all disciplines and areas of responsibility within the hospital. Groups are composed of long-time healthcare professionals who have years of experience to bring to bear on the books they read and to the insights they share with one another. Everyone is on a first-name basis: physicians, lab techs, nurses, janitors, everyone. Everyone's voice is equal. The reading is the focus of the discussion. Of course, the reading and the discussion are intended to be relevant to the group's work, but this is not group therapy, nor is it an organizational development session. and it is not a class. The discussion is totally confidential. What is said within the room stays within the room. Supper is typically part of the evening and serves to ease the transition between the workday and the discussion, and to give members an opportunity to check in with each other before the discussion begins. So you might be thinking, this is all very nice, but what does it add up to? Do we need this? Do we have time for this when we're under such pressure to serve our patients? Well, take a look at these outcomes. We have found, after 5 years of evaluating the literature and medicine program, that participation results in a significant increase in empathy for patients, improved interpersonal skills, improved communication skills, increase in job satisfaction, and improved cultural awareness. It is important to note that these outcomes are reported by literature and medicine participants as a result of, in some cases, attending only 5 or 6 two-hour literature and medicine discussion sessions. So let's look at these outcomes more closely. 79% of participants reported a large or a medium increase in their level of empathy. As one participant wrote, the program increased my sensitivity to the long-term effects of war on individuals, and that there may be many issues that aren't apparent when we first see a veteran. "58% reported a large or medium improvement in communication skills. It has helped me communicate better with my patients of not only different cultural social groups, but across age and other perceived communication barriers," one participant wrote. 62% reported large or medium improvement in job satisfaction. I realize that what we do does make a difference, even if we don't see the end result at the time, said one participant. It has decreased my work fatigue, helped me develop new respect for some coworkers, and has given an opportunity to deal with feelings. This relates directly to the crucial issue of provider resilience and/or provider fatigue. 67% reported a large or a medium improvement in cultural awareness. This is a reflective process, said one participant. It is very different from the often limiting package teachings. I think, what does this mean for me as an individual or to the patient, rather than the generalizations about the patients that the curricula can lead to? 64% reported large or medium improvement in interpersonal skills with patients as well as colleagues. We are all being tested and stressed in new ways as we move from treating a primarily geriatric population to veterans in their 20s, many with young families, who may only have been out of the war for a few weeks. This shift raises many ethical issues and demands a change in our approach. The group provides an outlet for us all to talk about these issues, wrote one participant. We believe these outcomes speak for themselves. Literature and medicine can make a difference. It supports healthcare professionals, strengthening their resilience, combating provider fatigue, and thereby helping them better serve their patients. The Maine Humanities Council provides logistical and technical support for healthcare facilities that want to start or are implementing a literature and medicine program. Resources that can all be found on our website, mainehumanities.org, include program information, our annotated bibliography, a list of favorite readings, information about conferences and trainings, issues of Synapse, the program's e-zine, and podcasts of past conference presentations and readings. The Maine Humanities Council has also created 2 anthologies for literature and medicine, Imagine What It's Like and Echoes of War, which is particularly appropriate for programs in VA facilities. Literature and medicine would not have been possible without major support from the National Endowment for the Humanities. The vitality of the program and its success across the country is entirely dependent upon the hard work of the humanities councils in the states outside of Maine.
I'm Liz Sinclair, and I am a program officer for the Maine Humanities Council, as well as the coordinator of the Literature and Medicine program, and have the honor to work with Victoria and a lot of the other state council people who are here. Now that you've had a little taste of what the program is like, and you've learned a little bit more about the details of the program, it's really time for you to hear directly from the participants what the program has meant to them. And we're really fortunate to have 3 people who are from VA Healthcare Maryland in Baltimore, which is one of the 21 VA hospitals that are involved in the Literature and Medicine program, to be here to share your thoughts with us. So we really appreciate the time that you're taking and your administration for letting you come. I know you're all very busy. So I'm going to start out. I'm just going to ask them some questions, which I think will help us know a little bit more about what your experience has been like. And I'm going to start with Linda Kelson, who's the Director of Veterans Health Education, Nursing Affiliations, and My Healthy Vet. Linda, I wonder if you can help us better appreciate the context in which the literature and medicine programs are being participated in the VA hospitals. What sort of challenges do you and your colleagues and perhaps the VA hospitals themselves face right now?
I have to remember, I was told to use the mic. I think the largest challenge, and I think that every VA hospital in the country, and probably everyone in this room is aware, is the number of returning veterans that we have and the physical and mental problems that we are having to deal with on a daily basis. The demand for services is increasing every single day. And the strain that this puts on resources is incredible, and it means that we're constantly being stretched to do more with less. So that means that we need to be more creative, and creativity takes sometimes a lot of thought. And I would say one of the things that really came out of this last session of literature and medicine was really the diversity of the group that we had, because around our table, when we talked about things, we brought a lot of perspective. And the book that came to mind for me was Regeneration, which had a lot to do with dealing with shell-shocked soldiers, what we would now call PTSD. And that is one of our largest, I don't want to call it a problem because that's the wrong word, but it is one of the challenges that our soldiers are facing. It is one of the conditions that we have to support. And the people around the table brought energy and ideas and experience to the discussion and really lifted everybody's thoughts and perspectives. Marianne is another clinician, so I think that she can, address that as well as I, and probably better. So I'm going to toss off to her.
Why not, Marianne? Okay. Marianne, can you just tell us briefly who you are? Introduce yourself.
I'm Marianne Wilkinson. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner at the Baltimore VA. And I was new to literature and medicine 2 years ago. Because of the workload, we see patients every 30 minutes, And we worked very, very hard all day long. I came from a private practice where I was doing home care, and I thought that was hard. And then I jumped into the VA, and I had no idea. So when you're finished at the end of the day and the literature and medicine is offered in the evening, you're thinking, oh, I need to get out of here. I don't need to stop. But I have a colleague who's a paraplegic. He's also a veteran. He works with me in the emergency room. And he said, you know, you really ought to try this. He said, it's something different. It's something that you'll learn from. And so I said, oh, okay, Tyrone, you know, let me go up there and check it out. So I did, and I was really brought in from the beginning because it teaches so much compassion and empathy and lets you see things through patients' eyes. We learn about it clinically. I have lots of experience. I counted up 26 years of education. So when you're looking at things through the books, you're only seeing the facts. And that clinical piece that we were talking about in the poem earlier, it's wonderful to be able to see things from somebody else's eyes and recognize, okay, wait a minute, take a breath, step back, slow down, listen. And that's what I got from literature and medicine.
Thank you, Marianne. So it sounds to me like you're saying that this is really, I mean, your job is a hard one, and you're trying to provide the most excellent care you can for your patients. And I'm sure, and as you said, every day, there's a lot of responsibility and there are a lot of pressures. So this sounds like this has been helping you deal with that better?
I would agree, right. When I'm feeling stressed and I'm thinking, oh, then I think back, and Regeneration was one of those. There's several of the short stories and poems that when you recognize where the emotion is coming from, it's so much easier to deal with that and recognize that what you're hearing and seeing has a history, and that's what it helps to settle you down to accept things, and it's easier to remain calm.
And Franklin, you're a clerk in the mailroom, and so I think you probably have some contact with patients every day as you're delivering their mail. Can you think of a reading, or is there a reading that you can share with us that may have changed the way you think about your work or the patients that you're working with?
The first reading that we did, I can't remember the title, but it took place at the Vietnam War Memorial, and I've been there, but I'm new to the federal government. This will be 2 years this month. So, and when I came to the VA, I don't want to say I thought of it as another job. I don't want to say that because I feel like it kind of cheapens it. But during the reading, there was talked about a man who scratched with all the names of all the ones that lost their lives in the Vietnam War, and he, shaded in I believe it was his friend's name. And as he was doing that, the scene shifted back into his mind to where he could smell the gunpowder, he could hear the shells going off, his friends screaming, the bullets flying. And I had to take a step back to and really know that really they are human beings just like me, but they've taken it a step further than I did. They are actually defending my rights to even sit here, to even go to a literature and medicine club, and that reading really grabbed me. And it really elevated my sense of the humanness, even though I'm like I said, I have 4 children, I have a wife and 4 children, and everything, and have a very sympathetic ear. But it took that next step. Case in point, there's in a living center in Baltimore, there's a patient. He's a paraplegic, and since I'm the mailman, so I talk to him fairly often. And one thing, he always calls me the bill man, because all I do is bring him bill.
And he still likes seeing you.
And he still does that. And you know what? I'll accept that. I'll accept that. One day, I brought him a summons, a court summons, for jury duty. For jury duty. He looked at me. He said, "Frank, why are they wanting me to serve on a jury? I am a paraplegic. I suffer from narcolepsy. So I'm sure they don't want me on the jury." And why is that? Why is that possible? I mean, what else do I need to do? Do I need to show up? So anyway, so I had a lot of fun with that, and he and I had a lot of fun with that. But as we were talking, we discussed a lot of, he shared me a lot of personal things that were going on in his life, and I'm listening and really trying to really comfort him, because he has nobody that comes to visit him. But at least I want to do my share. So if anything, it elevated my awareness even further.
Thank you, Franklin. And, I'm wondering, Franklin, so you're a non-clinician in the group. What do you think it is that you bring to the discussion? Do you think that you have a perspective on patients that the clinicians might not be able to have? Or?
Well, I can't speak, for the clinicians like, Linda and Mary Ann, but dealing with the patients on a base level, because they bleed, they're scared, they laugh, they like playing games just as much as I do. And I'm able to talk to them, and I'm able to sympathize, and some things they may not share with clinicians. I'm speaking from experience, of course. But they are important as well. I had yesterday, the day before yesterday, somebody with two veterans. One, they were playing chess, and they do that in the cafeteria. One came up to the table, and it was clear. And he said, "Hey, man, I haven't seen you in such a long time." And as I was talking to them, they served in Vietnam together, and they haven't seen each other since then. And I just had to take a step back and to be able to realize that, and taking that like I said, at a base level, to be able to understand even better that they are still veterans in the hospital.
Thank you. So it sounds to me like, because you have maybe a more informal relationship with the patients, that you have a different perspective on the person as a whole person to add to the conversation.
Yes.
And Linda, I think we have time for just one more question, but I know that the VA is very concerned about really increasing patient-centered care. I know that's an initiative, and that's obviously very important. Does this program help with that?
Oh, I think absolutely. We're very involved in patient-aligned care teams, in case you don't know, what we call PACs, and we also have one of my programs, which is the My Healthy Vet program. And actually, one of our participants in this last cycle is she's a retired nurse and a veteran. And she participated, which was a little unusual because she wasn't an employee part of the group, but she's also part of the My Healthy Vet community and part of the PAC community. And so she was attempting to recruit part of her patient care aligned team to be part of the literature and medicine group, because she felt that it was such an enriching experience that she wanted members of her team to participate in the group. And she was sharing with her team about how much she was getting out of it, and wanted her providers to be part of it. And so was taking the opportunity to talk about how enriching she felt it was, and then also shared her experience with our our voluntary service and public affairs folks to talk to them about how enriching she felt it was, and wanted them to do some publishing in our connection, what we call the VAMIX connection, about it. But it's something that we feel, just transcends everything in terms of everything we do. And the way I see it is patient-centered, and I'm going to use part of what I do because I think it's important. I see about 400 nursing students every year because that's part of what my program is nursing affiliations. And one of the things that came out of the medicine and literature for this last year, and again, part of it came out of regeneration, but then another story, which was the 11, which I won't talk about. But when I talk to nursing students, one of the things that's really critical is giving them a view of who they are going to be working with. And the stories is what makes them see a veteran and not just another person in that bed. It is so critical that they view that individual as someone who has a complete story behind them, someone who served their country, whether in peacetime or war, because it's important that they view them for both, but particularly for that combat veteran, that they understand that that veteran brings a whole wealth of experience, a whole backstory that influences every reaction that they have. And really, literature and medicine gave me an appreciation, in particular this past year, to pass that kind of storytelling to those nursing students. And I had a group about 3 months ago, and I was talking to them about the veterans that they were going to be serving, because they're serving on one of our locked mental health units. And after I finished talking to them, they went off, and it was about 6 weeks into their rotation, and 2 of the nursing students came back down to see me, and they said, what you told me was so true, and it gave me a whole different window. And the experience that I had in group with the soldiers and in my daily reactions with everything I did during my clinical was so much richer. And I think that if we can translate that through these groups to the people that we touch, whether it's in our patient care line teams or with our individual veterans that we touch, in the people that Frank sees and the people that Marianne sees and the people that I see that come into my office, then this program is powerful and something that should be replicated in every hospital in the United States, not just veterans hospitals.
Thank you very much. So you've just heard from staff who've had the benefit of sustained engagement with both the humanities and in literature and their colleagues. And I think we could go on talking for a long time, listening to more of your experience. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But I want to thank you all for sharing your thoughts and your experiences with us. We really appreciate that. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions from the audience, but Victoria and our executive director, Eric Jorgensen, who's in the back, and I and the panelists will be staying for the reception, so please talk to us then. If you can't stay for the reception, our contact information is in your programs. And thank you very much.
Thank you. That was an incredible hour. And now we have Sarah here. Sarah Oger is the director of the New York Humanities Council, and she's going to introduce our second half for you.
Hello, and thank you all for attending and coming. Thank you to the National Endowment for the Humanities, Courtney Chapin for organizing, and Caitlin Green for helping, and of course Chairman Jim Leach, thank you for your words. I'd also like to recognize the federal-state partnership of the National Endowment for the Humanities, whose Edie Manza is with us today, and who makes our work possible at the state humanities councils. As the head of the New York Council for the Humanities, I've had the honor to work with and sponsor both of the programs that are being showcased today, and I'm very happy to introduce the Aquila Theater of New York. I've also learned a small point of etiquette in this work, which is to say to the veterans in this group and to the VA medical staff who are here, thank you for your service. Ancient Greeks, Modern Lives is a major new national public program by Aquila Theater of New York, supported by a prestigious Chairman's Special Award from the National Endowment for the Humanities, which brings veterans together with the public to create a national conversation on what classic Greek works mean to people in America today. This fascinating free public program of staged readings, lectures, reading groups, and workshops is visiting 100 libraries, art centers, museums, and theaters, reading groups, and other workshops and galleries across America, and that's been going on since May 2010 and will continue through April 2013. At the end of those 3 years, Aquila Theater will have reached over 165,000 Americans across the country. Let's welcome and see the presentation now of the Aquila Theater. Thank you.
Well, hello, everybody. My name's Peter Meineck, and I'm the Artistic Director of Aquila Theatre. I'm also a Professor of Classics at New York University. And I'm really honoured to be here today, not only among our veteran community, but also members of our first responders and medical community, Congressman, Chairman Leach, thank you so much. This is an honour. What we thought we would do today is really give you an example of what we do in Ancient Greeks, Modern Lives, which is, you heard we're going to 100 communities. I figured we'd make it 101 and do it here too and make you a community as well, because you know, we have a pretty diverse audience here. And a big part of this program is about creating a national conversation, getting people to talk to each other. And one of the things that classic literature does, and the humanities, is it gives people a deeper sense of being able to tackle sometimes things that are too painful, too political, or too difficult to speak about without screaming at each other through cable news networks. And there's nothing wrong with cable news networks, but sometimes we need something a bit deeper than that. Getting people together at a public library, at a theatre, at an art gallery, in their community, particularly in underserved communities, is an amazing thing. A big part of this program has been to reach out to the veteran community. By that, I mean veterans, their families, their cousins, and actually, by extension, all of us Americans. We should all be part of that community. We should all be aware of veterans and the needs of them and their families. And for me as a classics professor, I've already learned an enormous amount about classic literature by listening to veterans and listening to these meetings. I'm very pleased that a group of actors here really represent the program, where they're a mixture of professional actors, actors who are combat veterans, professional actors who are combat veterans, so it really is a sense of what the program's about. And I'd just like to ask them to introduce themselves one by one. Michelle.
Hello, I'm Michelle Vasquez. I'm from New York City.
Hi, I'm Johnny Meyer. I'm from University of Texas at Austin, and I served in Afghanistan in the airborne infantry in Iraq. I'm Brian Dellett. I'm a Vietnam combat veteran, and I'm also a professional actor out of New York.
I'm AJ Pichardo. I'm a student at NYU. I've done 2 tours in Iraq as a military police.
My name is Nathan Flower. I'm an actor and arts professor at New York University.
Hi, I'm April Yvette Thompson. I am a professional actor and writer based in New York City.
Great, thanks guys for coming. So what we're going to do is read 4 short scenes, 3 from Greek tragedy and 1 from epic. And really the idea behind this is for you as an audience to listen to these scenes, and really at the end of the readings, I'm going to sort of ask you guys for what you heard, what connections you made, and I'll also try and make some connections as we go. And my sort of model for this is that wonderful moment in Shakespeare's Hamlet, where Hamlet comes home from university and his whole world has changed, right? His father's dead, His mother has married his uncle. He's very confused. He's completely log-jammed. And then the players come to Elsinore. And one of the players performs a speech. And it's actually a version of a version of a version, if you trace the tradition, all the way back to a story of the Trojan War. He performs the story of Hecuba, the Queen of Troy. And what Hamlet can't believe is, he says, what's Hecuba to me? How can this character from 2,000 years ago move me to action? And of course, it moves Hamlet to the action of, ensnaring Claudius and putting on the mousetrap, and, it all kind of all goes horribly wrong, but you get the idea, right? But he says to those actors, hold a mirror up to nature. That's what I think the classics can do. I think they're classics because they're special, because they have a universality, because they speak to us all. So we're going to try and do that this afternoon, is hold a mirror up to nature and use these great old texts, which were all created by combat veterans for combat veterans in ancient Athens, to see what's reflected there. So the first scene we're going to start with is from Aeschylus's play, The Agamemnon, the first play of the only trilogy that's come down to us from the Greeks, the Oresteia. When this play was performed in Athens to an audience of 5,000 combat veterans, Athens was at war on 6 fronts. The Athenians were sitting in a theatre space beneath their own version of Ground Zero, which was the Acropolis that had been completely destroyed by the Persians about 20 years earlier. They were literally sitting on a ruin, reminded of the destruction of war. And Aeschylus, who had 8 years earlier presented the Persians, which was a story about the enemy and asking his audience to feel empathy for the enemy, produces this great work, the Oresteia, which is the world's first courtroom drama, and deals with issues of democracy and justice and going to war. This is a wonderful part of the beginning of the Agamemnon, where the chorus of old men of Argos tell the story of the army gathering to sail on Troy. We know the backstory, right? Helen's been stolen, or she's been abducted, or whatever. She's gone off with Paris to Troy, and Agamemnon and Menelaus has marshaled all the Greek forces at a place called Aulis, in a town called Colchis, to go to Troy and punish them for their offense against the rules of Zeus, against the rules of hospitality. The trouble is, a great storm has developed, and they can't sail. And this storm is forcing Agamemnon's men to die, to wander on the edge of insanity, to suffer and starve. His men are dying. He can't go forward and he can't go back. They receive a prophecy, and he interprets that that prophecy means he has to make a huge sacrifice. In this myth, it's the sacrifice of his own daughter, Iphigenia, who's killed as a sacrifice in order that the storm lifts, his command is saved, and they get to sail on Troy. Many of the veterans who've experienced this scene, I'll be interested in what you think, has seen this scene as a sort of mythological analogy of the choice that one, a commander has to make, and we're kind of sitting in a building where those choices happen every single day. The cost of war. Secondly, every soldier who puts his kit bag or her kit bag on her shoulder or his shoulder and walks out the door and leaves their family to report for duty is making a small but huge version of that choice every single time they go to war. And as many of the vets who've watched this program recently in Texas have reminded us, the cost of war on children. So with no further ado, I'll give you the paradox of Aeschylus's Agamemnon.
I can speak of the omen given to those mighty men before they took ship. Divine persuasion breathes through my song, the strength that grows with life. I can tell how the twin-throned power of the Greeks, joint rulers of the youth of Hellas, received a sign from the furious eagles and hurled against Troy the spear of war. The kings of the birds for the kings of the ships, one black, the other white-tailed, appeared on the lucky spear-armed side of the palace. They perched there, clutching a pregnant hare, who never had the chance for one last run, and in full view feasted on her unborn young. Cry, cry the song of sorrow, but let the good prevail.
The army's trusted prophet saw how the two warrior sons of Atreus, the commanders of the fleet, resembled the hare-devouring eagles. He made this prophecy. One day, this invading army will seize Priam's city, but not before its herds have bled away beneath the towers, doomed to destiny's death. but let no envious god cast a cloud of darkness over this mighty force that will harness Troy. Beware, for Artemis, pure goddess, feels pity. She resents her father's winged hounds for the sacrifice of the trembling creature, the parent's own young. She hates the eagle's feast. Cry, cry the song of sorrow, but let the good prevail.
Beautiful Artemis, kind even to the fiercest lion's cub. She takes delight in suckling young of all wild beasts that roam the fields. She begs to fulfill these signs, for the omen I saw was both good and evil. I call on Apollo, god of healing. Calm her. Let her not send savage storms to keep the Greeks from sailing, demanding another sacrifice, unspeakable, uneatable, crafting ingrained, inborn strife. Fearless of any man it waits this recurring, persistent terror, the covert keeper of the house, unforgiving, child-avenging rage. This was the prophecy shrieked by Calchas to the royal house, signs of great good and portents of doom. And we sing the same bittersweet harmony. Cry, cry the song of sorrow, but let the good prevail.
And on that day, the first sea lord of the Greek ships did not blame any prophets. He swayed with the winds of fortune. The Greek force was unable to sail, and they started to suffer and starve, sitting in their ships off the coast of Colchis, rocked back and forth by the swelling tides of Aulis.
The bitter winds blew down from the strident, bringing hunger and delay to that wretched harbor, driving the men to wander on the edge of insanity, wearing thin the cables and rotting the ships. Time, crawling slowly by, wore them down. The flower of Greek manhood began to wither and waste away. Then the prophet cried out, in the name of Artemis, proclaiming a remedy to soothe the storm. And the sons of Atreus beat the ground with their scepters, unable to hold back a flood of tears.
Then Agamemnon, the eldest, spoke. An unbearable fate will fall on me if I disobey. But how can I bear to slaughter my own daughter, the glory of my house? How can I stain my hands, the hands of a father, with this young girl's blood as it drenches the altar? How can I choose? Both ways are full of evil. Should I desert the fleet and fail my allies? The sacrifice stops the storm. The blood of a virgin must be spilled. Rage craves rage. What must be, let it be for the best.
And as he strapped himself to the yoke of necessity, his storm-swept psyche veered on an impious course, impure, unholy, unsanctified. At that very moment, he changed. And his altered mind would dare do anything. Such shameless thoughts made mere men bold, maddening minds and reducing them to ruin. And so he dared to sacrifice his daughter, a first offering to bless the fleet, to fight that woman, revenging war.
Her pleading, her terrified cries of "Father!" Her pure young life counted for nothing with the chiefs. They were too hungry for war. Her father prayed to the gods, then ordered his men to raise her up over the altar, face down like some sacrificial goat. She fell at his feet, clasping his robes, begging for mercy with heart-rending cries. He ordered her beautiful mouth to be gagged, to stifle a cry that would curse the house.
And as the bridle forced her silence, steeped saffron poured to the ground. Her eyes threw a last pitiful glance at her sacrificers, but like a figure in a painting could not call to them for help. How often she had sung to these same men as guests in her father's house. How many times her pure young voice had so lovingly sung for her father the sacred song at the third libation. What happened next I did not see, and I cannot tell, but the prophecies of Calchas are always fulfilled. Justice will tip the scales to bring learning through suffering. You will know the future when it comes. Until then, let it be. To know the future is to bring sorrow in advance. It will all come clear in the light of dawn. And let all that comes now turn out for the best.
Thank you. It's powerful stuff, and Agamemnon's tragic decision between saving his command and his responsibility and his own daughter is a true tragic decision. And Aeschylus, who lost a brother at the Battle of Salamis and fought at the Battle of Marathon himself, is asking you as members of democracy, what would you do when we make those kind of decisions to send our young women to war? The true essence of tragedy. There's lots there. We're going to move on because I want to get through all our scenes today. The next scene is from a Sophocles play, himself a general, Sophocles' Ajax. Ajax is the second best warrior at Troy. His cousin Achilles, clearly the best, but when Achilles dies, Ajax is it. Ajax is the man who fought bravely on the prow of the ships, keeping the Trojans away from the Greeks. He's a big warrior. He fights eye to eye in the daylight with his shield and his sword. You want Ajax on your side. Achilles has died, and Ajax feels that he should get his armor, the trophy of Achilles' armor. But the Greeks decide to award it to a new kind of warrior, a man called Odysseus, who is the, sneaky-peaky special forces, black ops of the ancient world, right? He's the guy that comes up with the idea of the Trojan horse. He's the guy who plans attacks at night. This is not the way that Ajax wants his world to be. So Ajax snaps. Here's a man who's been fighting for a cause for 10 years, and that cause has rejected him. He's pushed out. He can't take it anymore. He snaps. He decides to kill all the Greek commanders. He sets off in the night to do so, but Athena deludes his sight. Instead of killing Agamemnon and Menelaus Odysseus, he falls on animals and sheep and goats, believing them to be his enemies, drags them back to his camp, and is torturing them. All of this is witnessed by Odysseus. Ajax opens this play covered in blood, ranting and raving. Seems repellent to us. But the Athenian infantryman, the hoplite, the average middle-class Athenian male, had to fight in the hoplite phalanx next to his neighbor, his brother, standing in line, pushing the enemy in what must have been a horrific, bloody experience of war. So in a way, Ajax is really a representation of the common soldier here, driven to extremes. Ajax ultimately and famously commits suicide. And it's Ajax's suicide that strikes a chord tragically with so many of our veterans today. Suicide, as we know, is a major issue in our veteran community. I don't think I have to tell anybody here that. And this play deals directly and honestly with the issues of suicide, or one issue of suicide, and that's Ajax's. We're going to have two very short scenes of the play. The first scene is that Ajax has taken what we classicists euphemistically call a spear bride, okay? But let's be honest, Tecmessa is a woman who Ajax has raped, kidnapped, killed her father and her mother, conquered her country, and is now living with him in his tent. Her survival is based upon the child they've had together and the loyalty and love that he now feels for her. She now sees this man falling apart in his madness. And this is an amazing scene about the wife, the woman, now even the husband, the spouse's portrayal of what happens when their warrior starts to fall apart. The pressures of combat is too much. She has to come out of the tent and persuade Ajax's battle-hardened soldiers not to desert, not to run away, to stay and stand with him. So we join the play where Tecmessa is pleading with the chorus and trying to explain what happened on the previous night.
Soldiers of Ajax, sons of Athenian soil, the house of Telamon is far away, but all of us must share its pain. The magnificent, powerful, and fierce Ajax lies suffering, struck by a storm of madness.
What happened last night that could make today worse? You're the daughter of a Phrygian, but ever since Ajax won you in battle, he's come to love you deeply. You must know what happened.
How can I speak what is unspeakable? You want to die when you hear it. Our glorious Ajax was driven insane and brought down disgrace in the night. Look inside his tent for the proof. You'll see the slaughter. This sacrifice is soaked in blood.
What you've said about this fierce, fiery man is too hard to hear, but inescapable. The greatest Greeks shouted out, and mouth to mouth the rumors swell. If he went berserk, unleashed his dark sword, and massacred the drovers and their herds, then I fear what is to come. There will have to be a public execution.
From there, those animals he captured came from there. He split the throats of some, others he hacked to death, shattering their bones. He caught 2 white-footed rams, tore the head off one and ripped out its tongue. The other he tied to a pole and took 2 huge leather straps from a harness and flogged the ram with a double lash, stinging the air. A torrent of evil curses flew from his mouth, so foul, only a demon could have taught them to him.
The time has come for us to hide our faces and creep away on foot or get to the ships, pull away to wherever the wind takes us. The commanders, the 2 sons of Atreus, are making angry threats against us. I fear the end if I stay with him. Death by stoning alongside a man struck by fate too terrible to endure.
But it's over. As quick as lightning from a cruel southern storm, his madness blazed and died. Now sanity brings new pain. To see your own misfortune, to bear the blame alone, this strains his very soul.
And if his madness is gone, all will be well. The talk of it will fade, the trouble will pass.
If you hurt your friends, what would you choose? Would you want to be happy about it or feel remorse and share their pain?
The first. The second choice is a double blow.
And so we are worse off now that his madness is past.
What are you talking about? I don't understand.
When he was mad, at least he took pleasure in the dark depths of his obsession, though we, the same, could not bear to see it. Now he has some relief from his sickness. He feels the full weight of his misery. Our initial pain remains as sharp as ever, but now we know twice the agony.
You're right. I fear he was struck by a god. Why else would he be so unhappy now that he's no longer sick?
Now you know. This is how things stand.
How did this happen? This devastation. You could tell us. We're all caught up in this.
Because it involves you, I'll speak. In the dead of night, when the lamp burns low, he rose up and took his double-edged sword, intent upon some senseless mission. Ajax, I said, where are you going? I've not heard the trumpet call, nor has there been a messenger. The whole army is still sleeping. And all he said was that old line. A woman's best attribute is silence. I knew to keep quiet. And he hurried off alone. I can't tell you what happened out there, but he returned dragging tethered bulls, herdsmen's dogs, and captured sheep. He slit the throats of some, others he hung up and butchered, cleaving them in 2. The rest were tied up and tortured, as if they were men, not livestock. Finally, he burst out the door, ranting in a shadow, scorning the sons of Atreus and Odysseus, and brashly laughing at some outrage he had done them. Then suddenly he came storming back inside. Slowly and painfully, he returned to his senses. And when he saw the carnage under his roof, he grasped his head and screamed, crashing down into the bloody wreckage. Then just sitting in the slaughter, fists clenched, his nails tearing into his hair. For the longest time, he just sat in silence. But then he threatened horrific things if I didn't tell all that had happened, and how he came to be in such a condition. Friends, I was so scared. I told him what I knew, and he let out such pitiable, mournful cries, sounds I had never thought possible from him. He'd always thought weeping cowardly a sign of weakness and lesser men, or thought he would never cry or wail, but simply groan and bellow like a bull. Now he's been laid low by this evil. He won't eat or drink or say anything. He just sits in the midst of his butchery. I know he's planning to do something terrible. I hear it in his bitter, tormented cries. Oh, my friends, this is why I came to you. Please go inside and help him. He needs you now. Men in such a state can be talked into sense, my friends.
Tecmessa knows that the only hope for a husband is his fellow combat vets. They're the only people he's going to listen to right now. How much is so familiar to anyone who's had to deal with anybody who's seen combat. Ajax emerges in this catatonic state. He doesn't know what to do. He fears in going home what he'll say to his father. How is he going to go home to his father and say that he's failed at this war? What can he do? He can't fight anymore for the Greeks. They're his enemies. He doesn't want to give his life in battle. He doesn't want to help the Greeks. So what he does is he actually tricks those he loves nearest and dearest, his wife, his son, and his men. He tells them, it's not quite a lie, but it's a brilliant use of language. And here Ajax, the great bull of a man, we see this different side of him, the man who's clever, sensitive, a man who deploys language brilliantly. He persuades them that he's seen the light, he's going to make peace with the sons of Atreus, he's going to go and cleanse himself, he needs to be alone. So in a very rare moment in Greek tragedy, we're left alone on stage with Ajax. Ajax has the sword of the Trojan hero Hector. In the Iliad, Hector and Ajax had fought a duel. They were equally matched. At the end of the day, they stopped fighting and they parted and they exchanged gifts. Hector gave Ajax his sword, and Ajax gave Hector his belt. The belt was used by Achilles to wrap Hector's feet, bind him to the chariot, and drag his dead body around the walls of Troy 3 times. And now Hector's sword is going to be the implement that Ajax uses to commit suicide.
The executioner is ready to do its work, standing where it will cut most efficiently. To think, if a man can think at a time like this, that this was a gift from Hector, a token of friendship from my most hated enemy. And now it is planted in enemy soil at Troy, newly honed on the iron-biting whetstone. I've planted it firmly in the earth. Let it be kind. Let death come quickly. Everything is ready. Zeus, it's right that I call you first. I only ask one small thing. Send a messenger to Teucer with the news of my death. Let him be the one to lift me up after I've fallen on this freshly stained sword. Don't let one of my enemies find me first and throw me out as carrion for dogs and birds. Zeus, I ask you for this, but I also pray to Hermes, guide to the underworld, to help me fall on my sword without a struggle, one quick sharp thrust, then lay me painlessly to sleep. I call on the immortal virgins who feed on the sufferings of man. You far-treading furies, mark how I am being destroyed by the sons of Atreus. Overtake that foul pair with some horrific fate. As they see me brought down by suicide, so might it be suicide for them when they are destroyed by their nearest and dearest. Come, furies, to a feast of vengeance. Feed on the whole army. Devour them all. And you, Helios, sun god, climbing the heavens in your chariot, when you see my homeland, pull up your golden reins and bring the news of my death to my old father and the poor woman who raised me. Oh, my unfortunate mother. When she hears this news, the whole city will echo with her grief-stricken cries. I will achieve nothing if I give way to grief. I must do this now, without delay. Death! Death! Do you see me? I will soon be speaking to you face to face. This is the last time Helios the charioteer will ever shine the light of day on me. O sunlight, sacred Salamis, my home, my father's hearth and throne, legendary Athens, land of my kinsmen, you springs and rivers that water this plain of Troy, you nurtured me, and now I take my leave of you. These are the last words of Ajax. Now he speaks in Hades to the dead.
It's interesting that there's no John Waynes in Greek tragedy. All these combat veterans are troubled, they're honest, they're dealing with their issues, their furies, their own demons. There's a great honesty, I think, in Greek tragedy, which is why I think this work's prevailed. And you saw that in that amazing speech, which, you know, still touches us 2,500 years later very deeply. The next scene that we're going to do is a traumatic scene. The greatest of Greek heroes is Heracles, or you may know him as Hercules. And yet, Heracles, the combat veteran, is allowed no peace. He's allowed no family. In myth, he kills at least 2 families through fits of madness. And in Euripides' Heracles, his second family are awaiting for his return from the last of his famous 12 labours. He's gone to the underworld. He's been gone for a year. His family think he's dead. They're waiting for him in Thebes. They're at the mercy of a tyrant called Lycus who wants to kill them and get rid of them. And in true Euripidean fashion, in the middle of the play, like a knight in shining armour comes Heracles the hero to save his family. He does save his family. He lies in wait inside the house for Lycus the tyrant who comes to kill his wife, children and father, and instead Heracles kills Lycus. The problem is the killing doesn't stop there. We had one very perceptive young veteran of Afghanistan who said, this man has slipped between his two realities, the reality of war and the reality of home, and he can't tell the difference between the two. This happens to Heracles. He keeps on killing. He kills his own children, he kills his wife, he tries to kill his father in the belief that he's killing his enemies. So we're going to join the play with the messenger from Euripides' Heracles who comes out to tell us of the carnage that's happened inside the house.
The children are dead. Weep. That's all there is to do. Though his aim was to rid his house of a great scourge, Heracles had, after all, killed the king of the land. This called for the purification of the palace, a cleansing of the stain of regicide. But he did nothing. He just stood there, in silence. Minutes went by as the children stared intently at their father. He was no longer himself. He grew more and more agitated and disfigured as his eyes rolled back in their sockets and showed increasingly bloodshot, the veins swelling like rivers about to burst their banks. His mouth filled with the froth that oozed from between his lips and streamed down his beard. Heracles then spoke in a strange voice to his father, laughing nervously like a lunatic. So who is going to fetch my bow and my club? I'm off to Mycenae. I'm going to need my crowbars and my picks. The Cyclops built walls to last forever, but those walls are coming down. Next, he mounted a chariot that only he could see. He grabbed rails and reins, waving his hand and lashing to full speed horses that weren't there. With the warriors or a hunter's stealth, Heracles stalked the halls of his own house until he stormed into the banqueting room and announced that he had breached the walls of Nissos. Then he wrestled furiously with an unseen opponent, and doubling as herald, he called for the attention of an unseen assembly and proclaimed, Heracles himself, the glorious victor. Next, he swaggered his way into Mycenae, trumpeting wild threats against Eurystheus. This was when his father took hold of his powerful arm and tried to get through to him. Oh, child, what is happening to you? Where have you left us and gone to? You're raving and possessed. Why? It must be the killing you've just done. You still have their blood on you, in you. But Heracles never saw or heard his father say these things. To him, his father was no other than the father of his enemy, Eurystheus, come as a desperate suppliant to touch his hand and plead for life. His own children, wild with fear, darted this way and that. One ran for cover under his hapless mother's skirt, another dashed behind a pillar, and the third son, like a terrified bird, huddled alone against the base of the altar. Their mother cried out frantically to her husband, "What are you doing? We brought these children into this world. Are you going to kill your own sons?" In sudden hot pursuit of one child, he chased him round and round the pillar, and then, with a quick and deadly reverse of direction, confronted him face to face. At point-blank range, Heracles loosed an arrow into the boy's heart. The child fell straight back and lay facing the ceiling, soaking the stone pillar with his blood as he bled out his life. Standing over the body, Heracles gave the victory shout and added his own boast. "Here at my feet lies Eurystheus, his whelps, dead at my hand, in payment for his father's enmity." Back in the attack, he drew a bead on his second son, clinging in fear at the base of the altar, and hoping to escape notice. This red child, in his frenzy, was too quick for him, and in supplication, threw himself at his father's knees, grasping too for his beard or neck. He pleaded for his life with the man who should have loved him most. "Oh, beloved father, I beg you, don't kill me. I am your son, your boy. Eurystheus is not my father. You are." What looked down on him, though, was not his father, but some crazed killer with the wild, leering eyes of a gorgon. With his prey clutching him close, Heracles found he could not draw his bow. So instead, with all the force of a blacksmith smiting molten iron, he smashed the blonde-haired boy's head with his club, crushing his skull. 2 down, and Heracles wasted no time in pursuing his third victim. The child's desperate mother, however, beat him to the quarry, snatching up the boy and racing from the chamber with him tucked under her arm. She reached safety none too soon, slamming and bolting a great door behind her. Undaunted, as if tearing down colossal Cyclopean walls, Heracles went at the door with crowbar and pick and soon tore up the doorpost, launching one of the posts as a massive makeshift lance. Launching, he brought down mother and child in one throw. Their spines split in two. Then, so swiftly that you would have imagined him mounted on a horse, Heracles raced to rob his aged father of his life. But at that instant, a dazzling apparition filled the room and convinced our eyes that we were in the presence of Pallas Athena. Her helmet was brilliantly plumed, and above her head shook a fearsome spear, and with the other hand, she hurled a virtual boulder at Heracles' chest, dropping him at once to the floor where he lost his rage for slaughter and passed into a deep sleep. There he lies, poor devil. He can't be having happy dreams, not after slaughtering his own wife and sons. If there is a more miserable man anywhere, I don't know who he could be.
Thank you, AJ. One of our readers can't be with us today, Sergeant Jack Eubanks, who was going to be a fellow Marine for me up here today. I've just got these Army guys, so what can I do? Sergeant Eubanks just got back from Afghanistan about a week ago, wounded for the second time, and got called to Quantico this morning, so sadly he can't be here. So I just wanted to say that. Well, let's just cheer you up now after those 3 horrible scenes of tragedy, and give you a homecoming scene from the Odyssey. The great story of a warrior's homecoming. Odysseus has spent 10 years at Troy and 10 years getting home. And I think this program is encapsulated in a moment in the Odyssey where the penultimate place where Odysseus is before he gets home is he's in the court of the Phaeacians, and he's in disguise. And he doesn't want to reveal himself or tell his story. Then he hears the bard Demodocus, who comes in to their feast and starts singing and telling stories of the Trojan War, the war that he himself fought in. At that moment, Odysseus cries. And the king says, "Why are you crying?" And, to cut a long story short, it is the Iliad, is the Odyssey. Odysseus says, "Because I am Odysseus." And at that point, he tells his story. The catharsis, I think, of mimesis, the act of mediating our stories and telling them to each other, has great power, I think, to bring out the truth of emotionality. And here's another example from Book 23 of the Odyssey. Odysseus comes home in disguise, reveals himself, kills the suitors, you know the story, purges his house, judges everybody. The great heroes come home. Not yet. His wife is not yet convinced that this is her husband. So she puts him to the test. And he's furious. I mean, he can't understand why she doesn't just, throw her arms around him after 20 years and welcome him home. So she tests him. Odysseus built their house, it's a secret, from an olive tree. And that olive tree, the stem of the olive tree formed their bed. And only he, she, and one faithful maid know the secret of this bed. I mean, it can't be moved. Literally, it's the foundation of the house. So Penelope orders the bed to be moved, and this freaks him out. Odysseus drops his guard, becomes kind of a 5-year-old boy again, right, ranting and raving about this amazing thing he built and this deep personal thing. And it's a beautiful moment where suddenly this intimacy between this couple is restored. We performed this scene at the Iowa National Guard base a couple of weeks ago, and there was a master sergeant there who'd been in the army about 30 years and been on various deployments with his wife, and they just so responded to this scene about how they find each other after deployment and how they come back to each other, a familiar song on the radio, a joke that they tell, how hard it is sometimes to let each other back in their lives. So we're going to leave you with this final short scene of Book 23 of the Odyssey, and we should have a few minutes afterwards for some questions. So have a think about this, and any of the scenes that you've seen, if there's anything that jumped out of you that struck a chord with you, that reminded you of something, we'd love to hear about it. So, Book 23 of the Odyssey.
The great-hearted Odysseus was home again at last. The maid Eurynomé bathed him, rubbed him down with oil, and drew around him a royal cape and choice tunic, too. And Athena crowned the man with beauty, head to foot, made him taller to all eyes, his build more massive, yes, and down from his brow the great goddess ran his curls like thick hyacinth clusters full of blooms. As a master craftsman washes gold over beaten silver, a man, the god of fire, and Queen Athena trained in every fine technique, and finishes off his latest effort, handsome work. So she lavished splendor over his head and shoulders now. He stepped from his back, glistening like a god. And back he went to the seat that he had left, and facing his wife, declared,
"Strange woman, so hard. The gods of Olympus made you harder than any other woman in the world. What other wife could have a spirit so unbending, holding back from her husband, home at last for her, after bearing 20 years of brutal struggle? Come, nurse, make me a bed, I'll sleep alone. She has a heart of iron in her breast."
"Strange man, I'm not so proud, so scornful, nor am I overwhelmed by your quick change. You look, how well I know, the way he looked 20 years ago, setting sail from Ithaca aboard the longward ship. Come, Euryclea. Move the sturdy bedstead out of our bridal chamber, that room the master built with his own hands. Take it out now.
words, they cut me to the core. Who could move my bed? Impossible task, even for some skilled craftsman, unless a god came down in person, quick to lend a hand, lifted it out with ease and moved it elsewhere. Not a man on earth, not even at peak strength, would find it easy to prise it up and shift it. No. A great sign, a hallmark lies in its construction. I know. I built it myself, no one else. There was a branching olive tree inside our court, grown to its full prime, the bole like a column, thick set. Around it I built my bedroom, finished off the walls with good, tight stonework, roofed it over soundly with added doors, hung well and snugly wedged. Then I lopped off the leafy crown of the olive, clean cutting the stump bare from roots up, planing it round with bronze smoothing glaze. I had the skill. I shaped it plumb to the line to make my bedpost, bored the holes it needed with an auger. Working from there, I built my bed start to finish. I gave it ivory inlays, gold and silver fittings, wove the straps across it, outside gleaming red. There's our secret sign. I'll tell you our life story. Does the bed, my lady, stand planted firm? I don't know. Or has someone chopped away that olive trunk and hauled the bedstead off?
Odysseus, don't flare up at me now. Not you. Always the most understanding man alive. The gods. It was the gods who sent us sorrow. They grudged us both a life in each other's arms. From the heady zest of youth to the stoop of old age. But don't fault me. Angry with me now because I failed. At the first glimpse to greet you, hold you so. In my heart of hearts, I always cringed with fear. Some fraud might come, beguile me with his talk. The world's full of the sort. Cunning ones who pluck their own dark ends. Remember Helen of Argos, Zeus's daughter? Would she have sported so in a stranger's bed? If she dreamed that Achaea's sons were doomed to fight and to die and to bring her home again? Some god spurred her to do her shameless work. Not till then did her mind conceive that madness, blinding madness that caused her anguish, ours as well. But now, since you have revealed such overwhelming proof, the secret sign of our bed, which no one's ever seen but you and I, and a single handmaid, actress, the servant my father gave me when I came, who kept the doors of our room you built so well. You've conquered my heart. My hard heart. At last.
The more she spoke, the more the deep desire for tears welled up inside his breast. He wept as he held the wife he loved, the soul of loyalty, in his arms at last. Joy, warm as the joy that shipwrecked sailors feel when they catch their sight of land. Poseidon has struck their well-rigged ship on the open sea with gale winds and crushing walls of waves, and only a few escape, swimming, struggling out of the frothing surf to reach the shore, their bodies crusted with salt, but buoyed up with joy as they plant their feet on solid ground again, spared deadly fate.
So joyous. Now to her the sight of her husband, vivid in her gaze that her white arms, embracing his neck, would never for a moment let him go.
It's not really a happy end. We ended it there, but he goes on to say that he's got to go off again and wander the earth with an oar for years and years and years. So the restlessness of the returning veteran, but beautiful scene. I wanted to get some responses, but to kick us off, it's such an honour to work with our vet actors here, our combat vet actors, and I want to thank you guys and our actors as well. Thank you again. I wanted to ask our actors who are vets, you know, what kind of responses they have to this material. I mean, Brian, you know, what do you think? There's a mic actually if you need it. Yeah, use this one.
Okay. A couple of things I've experienced. Did this with Peter. We did this back. I was involved with it in April, and I'll just there's a guy, a fellow Vietnam veteran, who said something that's worth paralleling with this work, which is that he said when he was in Vietnam, all he thought about was living, and when he got home, all he thought about was dying. And there's something about this material that encompasses that, some of that mentality, and also this notion of something I've become aware of only in the last few years, is this notion of spirituality and community, and the bridge with community and war, and realizing too that this is such rich material because it's got, you know, it's got the limits of human experience, which is one of the timeless elements of war, and my experience with other veterans who have witnessed this material come in along those lines, and so there's something brilliant about being able to channel language that is timeless. Yeah.
Thanks, Brian. AJ? Okay. They're shy. Be interested in any of you in the last few minutes we've got. What struck a chord with you, or anything you heard in the scenes that was particularly resonant? And you certainly don't have to be a veteran to speak. The idea is that these scenes speak to us all as Americans. I know I have a funny accent, but I am an American. Naturalized. I'm from Brooklyn. Yeah, sorry. Yes.
I think what struck me in a lot of the different scenes was the difficulty in returning home and reintegrating with families. So that kind of was the theme that I heard.
Yeah, and that, we've done about 40 of these already out of the 100, and that comes up time and time again. You know, each conflict has its own issues, and we've talked about this. And it's interesting that a lot, and I'm sure the other programs experience this, a lot of our newer vets, they're not ready to talk yet. You know, it's so much. And we see all these new issues and new problems. One of the things, I'm a volunteer EMT, and one of the things we see now is, you know, our vets do a lot of driving under great threat in Afghanistan and Iraq. And they're getting into accidents because they see something out the corner of their eye, and the cops come, and then they're all amped up, and now they're on the floor cuffed in the criminal justice system, right? And sometimes it just takes one of us to say, "Are you a vet?" And to talk to the cop and say, "Hey, this is a vet," just to slow that process down. So every conflict, and also now we're meeting women veterans as well. So this is, you know, where's the front line now? So where is home? And actually, I remember Jack Eubanks, when we did one of these events a couple of years ago, he wrote an amazing poem about going home. But for Jack, his home was Iraq, where his unit was, which was very moving. So that's a great comment. Thank you. Yes.
Yes, sir. I'm a women veteran, and I'm Army. My husband's Air Force.
No
so
Marines?
I deployed, and he remained home, so to speak. And certainly what hit with me was when Brian was talking to April about being cold, because you do certainly develop a wall, an emotional wall, when you have been separated from your loved ones. But what I do wonder, too, is the enemy within, so to speak. If you guys have ever done pieces on that, specifically military sexual trauma, because too many women and men have experienced that, and it's even a higher rate than combat PTSD. So I wonder if you've touched on that.
That's a really great point, and it's so interesting in scenes like with Tech Mesa that we as classicists might go, she's a spear bride, and not give it a passing thought. But when these issues come up, and they do come up, about both violence against women within the structures of the military and outside as well, and within the family, and when these issues come up, they're very painful. And obviously, in a public library setting, in a public setting, those things are very difficult. But individually, these things have come up. And actually, as the program's been developing, we've started to think about there's different kinds of people affected by war than just the most obvious, and different kinds of communities and different scenes you can choose to articulate different moments. And on that subject, I can think of a lot of scenes in Greek tragedy and Homer that deal directly with those kinds of difficult issues. So thank you for that. That's something I think that's definitely there. Yeah.
Psychotic, going about killing animals and things like that. It's very true, sadly. And so many, the one thing that we've noticed with treating our Iraq and Afghanistan veterans with respect has opened the door for the Vietnam veterans to now come and say, I need help too. And I had a veteran that admitted to me that every night after he went to bed, he was back in Vietnam patrolling his house, and he'd been doing this for over 30 years. Mm-hmm. And he came and he got help, and he said, you gave me my life. And what a wonderful way to let people see that it is real. It's real to them. And with literature, you have the distance.
And we've heard, so we keep hearing that about patrolling, about the nights, you know, and obviously some of these myths are extremes, and yet to some people they're not. You know, they're very, very real. We had one young woman in Fallon, Nevada, who was in the Navy, and she told us that, she said I could share the story, but she told us that when her father got back from Vietnam, all she knew was discord, and her mother and father divorced, and she thought they didn't know each other. And her brothers went to college, and immediately they were out of the house, the mother and father remarried. And, you know, you can work that out, what was going on there. But, I mean, it's remarkably tragic, isn't it, that the effects of what's brought home from combat and war. And, you know, we're not therapists or clinicians like you guys. We're artists. We're professors. We think about this stuff. But even just putting it out there and starting the conversation and letting members of the public start to hear this stuff. And, you know, Brian, yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking, these are amazing stories, but the key word might be story. That like I didn't even know I had a story for a long time. I just didn't even know I even had a story. And I think that like that's why it's important to get people talking. And whatever the expression is, whether it's a play or we caught the tail end of the literature and medicine, whatever it is that brings up a mirror of truth or creates an arena for trust. I think one of the most difficult things for Vietnam veterans, and I can't speak for other veterans, but I would guess that this is true too. One of the most difficult areas to rebuild is the area of trust. Yeah. That's
great. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. You got the mic. You have the power.
I appreciate the end when you held hands. I'm a spouse of a Marine, and for 5 years physically, he was stationed in 3 different states, and we made a sacrifice for me to stay home base with our older 2 children. So when you connected at the end, it just really brought it home for me, so I thank you for that. He was home, he's finally home, and he was home for 3 months before we really realized he's home, and we finally held hands with each other. So I thank you for that. That was beautiful.
Thank you for that.
I just wanted to share that this program, of course, is phenomenal. But if the intent is that this be a grassroots effort, which, based on the literature that I've read, how can we, I'm a poet, how can we artists and how can the artist community what can we do in our local communities
Yeah.
to ensure that this humanities-based activity, effort, is in fact successful, and that veterans and supporters of veterans, but particularly veterans, participate both as beneficiaries but also as contributors, because if it's not done that way, then there's going to be that continued stigma of, well, you're in need, as opposed to you have something we all need.
Exactly, and that is exactly what we see the program as, is that it's an exchange. The term veteran implies wisdom. In the first moment of Aeschylus, you heard learning through suffering, right? You know, there's a wisdom there, and it's very powerful. It's tragic wisdom, but nevertheless a wisdom. To answer your question, one of the things that the NEH really pushed us into, which at the time we didn't appreciate, but now we do, was they really wanted this to be a model for other programming. They were so right about this, right? And they really said, this has to be a model. We're going to give you money. This has got to be something that can spread everywhere. So please rip this program off, right? And do it yourself. And you do 100, okay? And you do 100, and you do 100. And the other thing we're doing is we go into public libraries, and we're not going to glamorous places. We're going to places that get nothing. The reason we're doing readings is because we can do this anywhere. We can do this in Camden, New Jersey. We can do this in rural communities. We can do this in Harlem. The thing is that we're going to places, we're also showing them, hey, do an event in the evening. Invite people, invite this community. Connect with your local, VA hospital, your VFW base, your army, your military base, your reserve base. Connect with your local theater. So many public libraries had never talked to their local theaters before, right? And we're making these connections in the community. So we do a program, we leave. We've shown them a model for public programming. And public libraries are one of the most amazing things in American culture, and they're under threat right now. So these kind of programs really, really help. And, not just libraries, but small museums and art centers and theaters. We've got to get the people back in those places and get the town square back and get the conversation going. So please rip this program off, right? And Chairman Leach will let you, right? And copy it and have it spread, because that really is one of the best things that I think the NEH pushed us to doing, is saying you've got to make this something that can spread. So that's the plan. Yes, ma'am.
I relate to the lady who's a spouse also. I'm a spouse also of an Air Force person who was in 26 years.
Wow.
And I was with him for 25 years. And I like the ending of when he came back and the hand holding, because I can relate to that also. A lot of spouses are also sitting into the same spot as their husbands. And it's just recently that we've had even Mrs. Obama come out with Women and Girls. We have to look at the spouses of these people coming back, and the spouse does not mean a female. It could be a male as well.
That's right.
And I'm with the Department of Agriculture, and we have something that's going called Women and Whiffing Lands, and we're with the spouses now. I do a lot of volunteer with Walter Reed and the USO, and I do a lot of counseling with a lot of these veterans, and that hand holding, all you have to do is grab the hand of the person and hold them and listen to them. And this touched me, and you did a wonderful, wonderful job, both of you. And you did too. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm kind of tired because I flew all night. I flew all night to get here from Los Angeles, but my name is Stephen Sherman. I'm a World War II disabled veteran. Thank you very much. But the thing that my mission is to get every homeless veteran in America off of these streets in the next 2 years. I'm on a mission. And I met this Dr. Bresky in Los Angeles, and he had seen me on television, and he comes over to my house every Thursday. He's got 2 clinics there, but he comes over to my house every Thursday. His name is Dr. Bresky, and we have set up an organization which he calls the Whole Person Centered Care. And nonprofit organization is named Dory Miller Memorial Foundation. Dory Miller was the #1 first hero in World War II. I met him before he got killed in 1943, and I named this after him in his honor. He's never got the Medal of Honor, but he's the first man in World War II. He shot down 4 Japanese planes during the first 30 minutes of World War II. Now, getting back to our clinic, is Dr. Besky says that all dementia and Alzheimer's patients can be healed. 50% of them can be healed where they can go back into society. And he has this scientific program which consists of 9 points. And one of the points is just what you're into, and I'm very excited about it. That's why I came. Number 1 is fun and laughter. Number 2 is relaxation, meditation, and prayer. Number 3 is music therapy, including Tchaikovsky and Beethoven. Number 3 is sleep. Number 4 is sleep. Number 5 is physical exercise. Number 6 is eat the brain, tune up your way. And number 7 is hydration. Number 8 is brain exercises and art therapy. And number 9 is performing acts of kindness. Just what you want. Thank you very much. I'll tell you more about it at the coffee clutch.
Thank you. I think we got time for maybe one more comment. Yes, sir.
My name is Ron Lindsay, and my wife's name is Elaine Lindsay. I once served in the United States Army, but we represent Twins Publishing, independent publishers and authors. We want to know what can we do to help the veterans of Afghanistan, because we've been working on books, but we've been working on books from 1861, the Civil War. We have a current book out. We told the story of the African Americans that fought on the Confederate side. Our book is out, but we want to know how can we tell the story of Afghanistan, and people contact us and let us know what we can do to tell their story. Their story need to be told because I retired law enforcement, and sometimes we misunderstand veterans, and we do throw them on the floor and all of that, but we got to realize they've been through a whole lot. So what can we write about? Can we do something? Let us know.
One thing I can say, it's very difficult to say one clear thing that'll fit everywhere, but that's sort of the beauty of art in general. There's not just painting, there's writing, there's music. And just like most veterans, I don't want to speak for all veterans, but I know my experience, the difficulty was realizing where home was. And then after realizing where home was, is realizing that, like Brian, that there might be a story to where I was before home or after I was home and in between. What has always helped me come back home, I'm not married, but what has helped me come back home has been theater. Not only as an audience member, but realizing that there's stories out there. They may not need to have any relation to the military for me, but knowing that there are stories, and then having people wanting to hear stories. My family to this day has no clue, except that I've been to Iraq. And that has been my experience with almost every Vietnam vet that I've met. They have never told anyone. And most shows I've gone to for the military, things like this, a Vietnam vet has stood up and said, you know what, that connected, I had this experience. But until then, they never told anyone. And that's sort of what I've dealt with also, where I just told myself, okay, you're home, figure it out. And I think that the best for me, or people like me, is definitely listen, but help us, teach us tools. Some of us don't have the tools to tell these stories. And one of the things I appreciated earlier was when you said it's not a problem, okay? It's a condition. It's an experience. I'm not an expert, I'm not a clinician, but I am experienced. And my experience has taught me that it's definitely not a problem. It's just realizing that just like we can take Greek texts and apply them to today, we can take our experiences and apply them to today. I've met law enforcement officers that have similar experiences where they look at windows, or they look at certain things. I've had experiences where I've been sniped at So I have a tendency to look at windows and look for purchase all the time. And just, I know there's no threat while I'm walking down the streets of the city where there's plenty of windows, but it's just my animal instincts for survival has taught me that, okay, look up every now and then and make sure, just in case. So.
Well, I want to thank again Chairman Leach and Courtney, Caitlin, and Claire. You should hire someone called Colin as well, and for this amazing event. We would like to meet you. We'd like to talk to you. We want to meet more public veterans organizations. We want to get the program out to more places. There's more places that we can go. We'd like to report back to the NEH at the end of the 3 years that we went to 200 places, right? We really want to get this program out there. So it's dependent on you. So please come and talk to us. Again, thank you to all the veterans here for your service. I want to give a round of applause again for all our veterans and those that help them, and thank you.